Why hello there everybody, welcome to Mad Metal Guy Videos channel. We're bringing you some tech review of the GTX 660 Ti from EVGA. So new guys, let's get to it. Start off with the specs of it all. It is 1344 CUDA cores. It has a base clock of 915 megahertz and a boost clock of 980 megahertz. It has 2 gigabytes of video memory at a 192-bit memory interface, clocked at 6008 megahertz, giving an effective memory bandwidth of 144 gigabits a second. And yeah, it has a blower style, it's a stock reference design cooler, but it has a non-reference PCB. Now let's talk about the overclocks that I've done on this. So the base clock is now moved up to 980 megahertz instead of the boost clock being 980. And the boost clock itself is actually 1045 megahertz. So yeah, 1045 boost, which is boost, 980 which is base. And then for the memory, I overclocked it to about 6250 megahertz, which is a decent overclock, nothing too major, but I didn't overclock it any further, for fear of artifacting in games. Alright guys, the test bed, it's not a test bed, it's my rig, but it comes with the AMD FX-8350, 12 gigabytes of DDR3 1600 megahertz RAM, the 660 Ti, a Kingston HyperX 3K SSD, which some games are installed on. Some are installed on the 1 terabyte 5400 RPM drive, and then I have a 600 watts Corsair CX600M power supply, all within the Cougar solution case, which actually has 2 intake fans in the front that will intake air, directly to the GPU. Alright guys, let's get started with some benchmarks. Starting off with some Bioshock Infinite benchmark. Basically, Bioshock Infinite is very playable at maxed out settings, except for post-processing. That is set to normal. For some reason, if I set it to anything else, the entire game just lags about. So, yeah, everything else set to ultra except for post-processing at 1080p VSync off. And I get about, I'd say, 90 would be the average. Max, I would say about 115, and then the minimum, I would say, it dips down a little bit to about like the 60s. Minimum would be the minimum. So yeah, that's for Bioshock Infinite. Alright, next game. Next game is Borderlands 2. Now this game is really smooth. I have it maxed out 1080p VSync off, except for physics. I keep physics off because it's just not really needed. It's not that good of a feature, but it really lags out the game like to the max, to where I can barely fucking play it. So VSync off, 1080p max out except for physics. Minimum FPS, I would say it drops down to 49 was the lowest frames per second I got, and that was just due to a weird stutter. But it usually hangs around the 80s and 90s, and 90 would be average, and maximum frame rate I saw was about 126 frames per second. So yeah, anyway, that's Borderlands. Next one. Alright, now for some Watch Dogs gameplay benchmark. So here we go. Watch Dogs I have set to medium textures, FXAA, and VSync off 1080p, but everything else is set to max. Yeah, all the graphical settings are set to max. I'm getting about max FPS. I get about 70. It goes up in the 70s sometimes, but not too often. Minimum, I've seen it go down to 39, and average, it stays around the 50s, like 53 to 60 something. So yeah, that is Watch Dogs on the GTX 660 Ti. Alright guys, next one. Alright guys, now time for some Saints Row 4 benchmarks. This game is running completely maxed out, 1080p VSync off. Yeah, just on the Ultra preset. Basically, the minimum frames per second, it dipped down to 47, but that was the lowest I seen it drop. So 57 or 47, and then maximum frames per second was about 81. Yeah, 81. And then average, it stayed within the high 50s to low 60s, and sometimes mid 60s here and there. But yeah, it's perfectly playable at this setting, so yeah, that's good to know. Alright, next one. Alright, on to Titanfall. Titanfall is actually pretty playable on very high textures with, what's it called? Everything else set to high with 2x MSAA and 16x anisotropic filtering. GeForce Experience tells you to run it on high, but with more anti-aliasing. I actually run it on very high with a little less anti-aliasing. So, yeah. The frame rates are literally about... It hits the 60 cap like almost all the time. During intense battles, though, it can get to 50, the low 50s, but that's literally about it. And I have not played this map yet, so I'm pretty crappy at this map. But that's just because I haven't played it yet. Alright, guys, next game. Alright, guys, now for some Black Ops 2 benchmarks. This is zombies, and I'm running everything maxed out. 4x MSAA, anisotropic filtering, whatever, everything's just completely maxed out on Black Ops 2. And the minimum frames per second I get is about, I've seen it drop into the 80s. That's actually pretty high for minimum. But yeah, into the 80s. And then max was about 134. And then average, it usually sat around 115, 113, around there. And yeah, it's honestly a really playable video game on this machine. So yeah, next one. Or actually, this is the last video, so we'll get on to some temperature benchmarks. Alright guys, now for some temperature recordings. So under gaming load, the max temp I saw on this with the overclock and everything was 74 degrees Celsius. Now that's not that bad compared to, since this has like a blower style fan with a pretty powerful GPU, that's not that bad at all. But yeah, 74 was the max. Idling, it's usually around 33 to about 39. So yeah, around there. And yeah. Alright, since this is not the full system review, I'm not going to do any video rendering benchmarks. But, yeah, that's my complete 660 Ti benchmark review. Anyway, guys, see you in the next one. Peace.